Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today our focus is on PultiGroup, ticker PHM. They are a home builder, and we're going to take a few minutes here just to look at their financials, then get into the valuation. And I do own this stock, so we'll move into my purchases, and then at the end we'll look at my portfolio performance. So we can see there are a few down years here in red, but overall steady growth throughout the past decade. And especially right here, revenue, we can see actually no down years for the past 10 years and actually growing at about 12% a year, or at least CAGRing at about 12%. And then for net income, yeah, 2023 was slightly down, but still up overall and up actually 450% since 2014, while earnings per share is actually up about 800% since 2014. And we're going to see that in a moment. A lot of that has to do with their share repurchases. And speaking of share repurchases and also dividends, these are two metrics I like looking at. Companies that do pay dividends, I like seeing these growing over time. And for dividends, we see growing almost 200% during this period. And while shares has declined almost 40% or about 40% over the past 10 years. So two great data points there. And then free cash flow, very important metrics here when we do our valuation. And we can see it's up more than 700% since 2014. So overall, great financials here over the past 10 years. As I said, yes, a few down years, but still, we can see they're growing over time. And if you're bullish like me and home builders, this should continue to grow, at least for the next few years, as we've underbuilt for probably close to the last 10 years now. So let's jump down and we'll look at the valuation. So here's PultiGroup's valuation, and you see my intrinsic value is just over $117, and with a 90% margin of safety, brings it to $105.60. And stock is currently trading about 112 or maybe more like $113. And this valuation that I have is based on a 13% short term growth rate over the next 10 years with a 10% discount rate. And I am using a 3% long term growth rate. Now, we can see up here in the top right, the net income CAGR over the last 10 years is just under 21%, while that earnings per share CAGR at just over 28% due to those share repurchases. Now, as I mentioned, I'm using a 13% short-term growth rate because I just want to be a little more conservative, and this is a home building industry, which is a little cyclical, though we haven't really seen a major down year for quite a while. So I am still bullish, but that's always a risk that there could be a downturn. But with some expectations that interest rates are going to drop, that would also help stimulate this industry and PultiGroup. But let's look at a few other data points here. So right now, PE ratio 9.7. Yeah, that's low, but typically home builders are rather low, and this is actually a good sign because companies with low PE ratios can significantly buy back their shares or get more value for their dollar as they buy them back, which we'll see. Long-term debt to free cash flow, I like seeing this under 3. We can see they're well under that, just over 1. So a great data point there. As we mentioned, dividends have been growing over the past 10 years, just below 200%. So great sign there. And then shares, actually down a little over 40% over the last 10 years. So as I mentioned, this really helps with these EPS, buying back shares. And then net profit margin, I typically like seeing over 10%. We can see they've achieved that for the past 10 years. And actually for the last 3 years, actually over averaging over 15%. So great signs here. And one other thing I like to look at is return on invested capital, a very important data point for investors. And I like seeing over 10%. We can see they're well over that for these periods and many times over 20%. So overall, great signs here. And as I mentioned, I do own this stock, so we're going to jump into that. And I actually just purchased a few more shares, though it's slightly over my intrinsic value with a margin of safety. I still think there's some value there. So let's move on and we'll look at those purchases. Here are all my investments into PultiGroup. And you see, I started making this back in May of 2022 at just over $42. And those initial investments now have gone up just over 170%. And then I made some more purchases into the stock back in March of 23, and that's up just over 114%. And then I made some more purchases today at just under $113, and that still needs time to play out. But overall, I am up 112%. Now, that would be a lot significantly higher if I did not include the purchases from earlier today. Well, if I put my money in the S&P 500, I'd be up just over 20%. So far, PultiGroup has been a great investment for me, and I do have a cost basis at $53.38. And then down below, you can see the overall investment, which is about $13,000, and the current value is $26,500. So far, paying off. Now, let's go over, and I'll just show you my overall portfolio performance. So here's the overall portfolio's performance, and we can see PultiGroup PHM on the far right there. A few other stocks I'll just point out: Toll Brothers TOL, they're another home builder, and I did a video on them probably a couple of weeks ago, and I've owned them for several years now. And we can see the one account, it's up almost 160%, and the account where it's just over 7%, that's probably a newer account that I just purchased this shares into. And then Nvidia, again, I did a video on that probably within the last week. At that time, the stock was trading about 840, 850, and I did buy in, though it was above my valuation. But then it jumped up to like over $900. But I am looking to buy in some more if it drops down to about 850 or lower. Though my valuation is at about $800, I'm just not sure if we're going to see Nvidia get that low. So if you're bullish on AI and advanced computing, so I think NVIDIA is a strong play, and I'm hoping to build my position in that company as well. But hope you enjoyed this video, got some useful information. If so, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.